What we need to know for macro analysis in general. There are 4 influential factors that together affect the growth of the U.S. economy. 1. The U.S. government, which is composed of 3 distinct branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. 2. The central bank, Fed, the Federal Reserve System. 3. The people, such as investors, business entities, workers, and others. 4. Foreign competitors who trade internationally. Good government is one of the most important factors in economic growth. Fiscal policy is the use of government spending and taxation to influence the economy. Fiscal policy that increases aggregate demand directly through an increase in government spending is typically called expansionary or loose. By contrast, fiscal policy is often considered contractionary or tight if it reduces demand via lower spending. The people can always track how the U.S. government manage the national budget by the national debt clock. The U.S. national debt is the sum of all outstanding debt owed by the federal government. It's an accumulation of each year's budget deficits, or maybe surplus. About 3/4 of the national debt is public debt, which is held by individuals, businesses, and foreign governments that bought treasury bills, notes, and bonds. The government owes the rest to itself, mainly to Social Security and other trust funds. And that's known as intragovernmental holdings. The debt clock also shows the national tax revenue. In the United States, individual income taxes, federal, state, and local, were the primary source of tax revenue in 2022, at 53.8% of total tax revenue. Social insurance taxes, including payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, made up the second largest share, at 30.4%, followed by consumption taxes and property taxes. Corporate income taxes accounted for 8.7% of total U.S. tax revenue in 2022. The United States federal budget is divided into 3 categories: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and interest on debt. Discretionary spending is spending that is subject to the appropriations process, whereby Congress sets a new funding level each fiscal year, which begins October 1, for programs covered in an appropriations bill. Mandatory spending is all spending that does not take place through appropriations legislation. Mandatory spending includes entitlement programs, such as Social Security and Medicare. Congress can only reduce the funding for programs by changing the authorization law itself, which normally requires a 60-vote majority in the Senate to pass. Debt ceiling takeaways. Number 1 is the 2-year suspension of the debt ceiling through the next presidential election, until January 1, 2025. It essentially means the government can borrow as much as they need unlimitedly. And obviously, both sides want to delay the potential political fight over the nation's debt load to 2025, past the next presidential election. Or perhaps this deal is to give the government the green light for a 2024 fiscal policy that would aid Fed's monetary policy. Number 2, the budget cut on so-called non-defense discretionary by limiting all discretionary spending to 1% growth, whereas the inflation rate is higher. This is just a technical win for the Republicans on medias, because both sides still avoid working on the significant part, mandatory spending, whereas discretionary spending is a much smaller issue. Furthermore, during the pandemic and the recovery, the government significantly increased expenditure, electing not to cut other spending or raise taxes. So, the limited growth rate of the expenditure does not equivalent to a spending cut. And just a friendly reminder, Congress can pass a new budget for discretionary spending every fiscal year despite today's agreement that mentioned next year, 2 more years, and a decade. Number 3, extra work requirements for government benefits for older Americans such as SNAP, which provides food stamp, and TANF, which provides cash aid. The bill imposes new work requirements for food stamps on adults ages 50 to 54 who don't have children living in their homes, while those work requirements only apply to people aged 18 to 49 under current law. The bill would also exempt veterans, the homeless, and people who were children in foster care from food stamp work requirements, a move to offset the program's new requirements and leave roughly the same number of Americans eligible for nutrition assistance moving forward. How are law made? The United States House of Representatives is the lower chamber of the United States Congress, with the Senate being the upper chamber. Together, they comprise the national bicameral legislature of the United States. The United States Senate consists of 100 members, 2 from each of the 50 states. There are currently 435 voting representatives. 5 delegates and 1 resident commissioner serve as non-voting members of the House, although they can vote in committee. First, a representative sponsors a bill. The bill is then assigned to a committee for study. If released by the committee, the bill is put on a calendar to be voted on, debated, or amended. If the bill passes by a simple majority, 218 of 435, the bill moves to the Senate. In the Senate, the bill is assigned to another committee and, if released, debated and voted on. Again, a simple majority, 51 of 100, passes the bill. After being passed by both chambers, a conference committee made of House and Senate members works out any differences between the House and Senate versions of the bill. The resulting bill returns to the House and Senate for final approval. The government printing office prints the revised bill in a process called enrolling. The president has 10 days to sign or veto the enrolled bill. If the president declines to either sign or veto it, that is, he does not act on it in any way, then it becomes law without his signature. If the president vetoes a bill, Congress shall reconsider it, together with the president's objections. And if both houses of Congress vote to pass the law again by a 2/3 majority of members voting, then the bill becomes law, notwithstanding the president's veto. Presidential election on November 5, 2024, and the upcoming Congress election. Ahead of the elections, Republicans hold a majority in the U.S. House, while Democrats and independents who caucus with Democrats hold a majority in the U.S. Senate. A total of 468 seats in the U.S. Congress, 33 Senate seats and all 435 House seats, are up for election on November 5, 2024. One special election is also scheduled for November 5, 2024. The special election will be held to fill the last 2 years of the 6-year term that Ben Sasse, a Republican senator, was elected to in 2020. Sasse resigned from the U.S. Senate on January 8, 2023, to become president of the University of Florida. What do you think about the role of the U.S. government in economic growth during 2023-2024? Thank you for watching.